to Smart Cities Week 2015. We're here in Washington, D.C. I'm Carol Stimmel in the Smart Cities Week studio today with Michael Leiter of Leidos. Mike, you have a lot of deep experience in security, infrastructure issues. One of the things you're working on now at Leidos is that understanding the process around community building, infrastructure in buildings, and security. And that's not something we hear a lot about, and I'm really interested in your perspective on that and where that's going to take us in developing smart cities.
Well, at Leidos, we've always thought about the many ways that you can make infrastructure smarter and then help the population and help the governance of that population be more efficient. But with all of that, it involves data. It involves data and information about people, about institutions, and there's no way in today's environment that if you're going to enable governments or private institutions to manage that data, understand that data, and improve their infrastructure, you can't simultaneously also help them understand and protect that data, because it is going to involve sensitive information, privacy, the security of that infrastructure. So from our perspective at Leidos, it really is both pieces. It's improving performance and simultaneously providing security and civil liberties protection for all of the data that is being managed.
So one of the things that Leidos is really focused on in terms of building and advising parties in the context of smart cities is governance. So if you could follow up a little bit on the concept of governance and how that really helps in developing smart cities.
Absolutely. Whenever you're dealing with smart city-like customers, and that could be a municipality, it might be a smaller utility, it could be an airport authority, a lot of this is helping them think through the data that they have, how that can be useful, and really how, as they go through this decision-making process, they're doing it in a practical way, they're doing it in a privacy secure way, they're doing it in a way that they're seeing benefits from that, and ultimately, again, as a customer who isn't thoroughly familiar with data, they have a partner walking them through all of the ways in which they can have this improvement within the construct of their potentially limited budgets, their challenges they have, and how they also inform their population of how that data is being used to improve the government's performance.
Okay, well that's a great point. So you talked about your customers, but then we have the customers in the city, right? Or the citizens. So I know that one of the things you think about is community building and how smart cities can really do right by their citizens. Talk to us a little bit about what you're trying to get different stakeholders to think about, consider, especially in the context of security.
Absolutely. There's no area where you have to have a tighter relationship between the governed and the government than cities and municipalities. It's where people feel their everyday government. And whether it's things like traffic issues or going to the airport or the rapid movement of commerce or energy, this is exactly where people feel a connection. And because of that, we really want to have that engagement with the customer, so they feel like they are serving their customers, and their customers are the population. Cities don't have the luxury of going out and making massive capital investments and not having a return back to their populations. That can't be done. So in any of these smart city projects, we really want to see a very direct relationship between investment and return, and that return is to the cities, and in turn, right back to the people who really make up those cities.
Well, let's talk about return on investment. So that's a balance between short-term returns and long-term, more strategic returns. So what does that look like to you when you're describing to a city why a smart city investment makes sense, or one of your customers, as you were speaking, utilities or airports? I mean, we're all struggling with that kind of return on investment, especially when it comes to data and data analysis and analytics.
Absolutely. Short and long term, there's always a trade-off there. And I think largely, cities are initially pulled in about the idea of a smart city because of that long-term potential. You're going to create that modern city. And that's absolutely an aspiration I think everyone should have. But at the same time, I think the realistic way of getting to a smart city is a series of smaller steps that spiral up towards efficiency. Because again, unlike potentially the federal government or some large industries, municipalities and cities don't always have endless capital to invest in the near term. So you have to find those smaller projects which start to prove their case, which start to return that investment back to the taxpayers quickly, and then you can start to spiral. So that's why we've often started with things like energy efficiency programs that pay for themselves, or smart grid as a service where there's no capital investment for a municipal power company. Those areas where even if there isn't capital, even if there isn't deep experience in data analytics, cities and municipalities in areas like that can start to get that return on technology. And once you do that, you can really build that constituency to grow it.
Right, so you're talking, we hear a lot about demonstration projects, pilots, that sort of thing. You're really talking about doing the real deal, but at a smaller scale to demonstrate how this return can be established and then building from there.
I think that's right. I mean, pilots are of course useful, but too often pilots are so small that no one actually sees the benefits and people aren't invested. These have to be programs that people are sufficiently invested in, that they take it seriously, and it's an important issue that they're trying to face. But you don't go from a city of the 19th century all the way to the city of the 21st century where everything is wired, every piece of data is collected. That's not realistic. It's not realistic in large enterprises of any sort, and it's especially not realistic, I think, in most cities.
Well, sometimes that's almost a philosophical question, but sometimes there's a thought that a magical smart city will emerge, and that's not really reality in so many of our urban environments, which are growing so quickly. So what do you foresee as we begin to smarten our cities?
Your first point is exactly right, that cities are made up of legacy systems, overlapping responsibility. There are often cities, counties, states, so you simply can't go from 1 to 100 instantaneously. So our approach has been to really prioritize those areas which there is an imperative, there tends to be some capital that can be invested, and people can start to see those effects quickly. So we focused on those areas where we have deep, century-long subject matter expertise. Energy infrastructure and energy efficiency, port movement of goods and services, whether that's airport, seaport, security side, but also really enabling commerce to move quickly, and healthcare. Those are the areas, transportation of goods and logistics, energy, healthcare, which are really key areas that every city wants, and every city needs the flip side, again, of leveraging that, which is making sure those things are secure and the privacy associated with that is also appropriately protected.
Right, so we can't always build it in from the beginning, but we always have to have it in mind as we're developing these new smart capabilities. So great points. I want to thank Michael Leiter of Leidos for joining us in the Smart Cities Week studio 2015. And again, thanks so much for filling us in on what you're doing at Leidos.
Thank you. It's a great event. We're happy to be here.